I was invited by a couple of friends to go camping a few days ago. I'm honestly still exactly not sure if any of it was real, but I wish to share my story nonetheless. It began last Monday, when friend number 6 invited friends 1 through 5 to a girls' getaway. She claims to have found this beautiful spot in the mountain on one of her hikes, and she says it's perfect for seeing the stars at night. I was skeptical at first. To be honest, I don't really like being outdoors, but it sounded like an experience worth having, so I thought, why not? This will be a wonderful memory to look back on. I had just purchased a new camera as well, so I was honestly starting to warm up to the idea. I could take pictures of our excursion into the woods and make cute little picture frames for everyone for their birthdays. It would have been so cute. But things did not go at all as I had envisioned. So the day of the trip arrives, a bit faster than I would have liked, but honestly I think I was just anxious about. I kept feeling this weight in my chest that made it uncomfortable to breathe, but I was going into the woods. Strange things happen to women in movies, Jason Voorhees, Sasquatch, Sheila Beouf. Who knows what could happen? Not to mention there is always the chance I could fall into a lake and get covered in leeches, or get surrounded by wolves, or chased up a tree by a bear. Hopefully a very soft bear, so I'll at least know one pleasure before I die. There are all sorts of fears I had envisioned before the day of the trip, but anxiety just be like that. I met up with my friends at the trail and learned that friend 6 decided to bring her BF along, which I was upset about, but I guess he was just going to get a hotel room nearby so he'd be close enough to her to feasibly show up if we needed any help. She later told us that he worries all the time because his father went missing in these woods years ago and he's worried the same might happen to her. This is where I learned that men tend to stay out of those woods because men have been going missing in those woods for years. But according to friend 6, she's been coming to this forest for a while now and hasn't had any bad experiences. Hearing that did oddly put me at ease, but now all I could wonder at the time was what happened to all those poor men. Deep into the night we were all chit-chatting, talking about where we are in our lives, things that are bugging us, what our hopes are, and dancing to the music of nature, but which of course I mean we got shit drunk, smoked some great weed, talked about sex, laughed over silly anime scenes, and twerked to Slipknot Girl Bops. It was such a fun night at that point that I honestly wish I could go back and never let that night end. It was intoxicating how beautiful the sky looked, and when gazed up it was almost like we could scoop the stars into our hands and sip from the sea of stars. I was worried we'd just be on our phones all night filming TikToks or something, but even with no signal, no one really seemed to be too stressed about it. We all just kind of felt safe. Almost welcomed into the forest, like being embraced by a loving mother. But unfortunately, heaven isn't forever, and men come not but to steal, kill, and destroy. As we were drinking we decided to tell some scary stories, or well I decided to because I thought it's so cliché but we have to do it. It feels like tradition almost, plus I would have regretted it if we didn't do it, so fuck it, right? Right. So we go around telling scary stories to one another, and I mentioned to friend 6 that I keep thinking about those poor men that went missing. I then asked if any women had gone missing, and surprisingly she said yes. It was way back in the 1800s, but after that there had never been a single missing woman in that forest again. The forest was actually named after the first young woman who went missing all those years back, and now there are all these rumors about it, but I don't believe in that stuff, so I didn't really pay much attention. I kept thinking I'll just wait for the manga, or the shitty Hollywood cash grab of it. But I do vaguely remember the history cause I find dark history lore to be super fascinating. So there was a time when the area had more Ojibwe people living here, before gentrification moved into town. She went on to tell us that the Ojibwe people eventually began to keep to themselves because as more white people moved in, more of their daughters went missing. There are yearly parades to honor the missing daughters and to spread awareness to those living in the town. The police try to shut it down, but they still do it every year. Not long after hearing that, we hear something howl in the distance. Friend 3 howls back and friend 5 falls on her out of her camping chair laughing. I tell them to knock it off because the last thing we need is for her to accidentally attract a wolf during mating season. I don't know if that's a thing, but it sounds like something that's a thing. So I'm just going to assume that it is. Don't judge me. She then says, but what if it's Taylor Lautner? Or Joe Manganiello? Personally, I'm more of a meatloaf guy myself. But you know, rib. But Joe is pretty fine, and my mom did always hope I'd marry a black man to get melanin back in our family. But I don't think a splash of melanin is gonna override this Asian/African skin, so. Anyways. So these guys come walking past our campsite, and we were all drunk and high, so we were already all on edge upon seeing random men this deep into the forest. But friend 4 gets up and says, who the fuck are you and what are you doing here? One of the men quickly apologizes and tells us they're actually out here camping as well. They said a friend of theirs found this waterfall in the forest that glows because it captures the moon's light. Friend 2 hears this and asks if we can go with them, to which we all begrudgingly agree. At the Moonkuzi, I like to call it, we all sit around this beautiful natural pool lit up by the moon, and we were worried it would be cold, but I was surprisingly warm. If I had to guess, I'd assume there's a magma vein under there or something. I don't know, I'm not a geologist or volcanologist, but something kept it warm, and it wasn't my tiny bladder. Everyone was really relaxed, and the guys honestly seemed super cool, and Guy 1 honestly seemed really nice. I call him Guy 1 because he's number 1 to me. We're still together now, and we even have another partner now, so yay. We all began talking, and some of us were hitting it off, clearly, but we had all been drinking and smoking more, which, honestly, we had stopped, but we couldn't pass up the opportunity to get cross-faded in a Moonkuzi. Nope. Not on my watch. But someone clearly didn't get the vibe memo, because friend 2 screams out, bro, what the fuck? I said no. The next thing we hear is, you don't have to yell about it like some kind of cunt. Everyone runs over to try and figure out what's going on. Turns out Guy 5 didn't like being told no. He and friend 2 were playing a drinking game with friends 3 and 4 and Guy 3 and 4. We learned that Guy 5 dared friend 2 to take her top off, to which she said politely refused, and the guys didn't seem to like that. They tried to convince her it's part of the game. One of the guys said she was already in her underwear anyway, so she might as well. My Guy 1 and Guy 2 scolded their friends for their behavior, which is why Guy 2 and friend 2 are married now. Guess nice guys don't finish last. Huh? Anyways, they scolded their friends for their behavior. I remember my guy yelling, "You never speak to a woman like that, and if I ever catch you trying to peer pressure a woman again, I'll take your testicles in my hand and squeeze on them slowly until I know what it's like to feel one pop in my hand." And it was honestly the hottest thing I've ever heard a man say. A bit violent, but fuck was I glad I was in the water. Guys 1 and 2 apologized for their friends' actions the whole way back. I asked them why they remained friends with them, and guy 1 had gone off to college while guy 2 went into the service, so the two of them had been away for a few years, but they swore their friends never used to be like that. This was actually supposed to be a reunion hike of sorts since they both happened to come back around the same time. After meeting up with guys 3, 4, and 5 though, they realized their friends had been warped by these podcasts about alphas and betas and maximizing your sigma or something, and tried to convince him to listen to some pickup artist that claimed to know the secret to unlocking the female brain. Also known as stupid useless slop grifters make to get rich off young boys with zero confidence and zero bitches. Lastly, he tells me guy 3 was actually raised by a single mother alongside his 2 sisters, so he really wouldn't expect that kind of behavior from him. Guy 4 was always sort of sketchy, but they thought he was just being funny, men right? The only thing they felt was weird about him was this one time when they were teens his sister moved away and he got really quiet afterwards, but then he dated a few people that looked almost identical to her, but for some reason he didn't see it, so they started calling him Little Sister, or did they? Oh, or Lil for short, joking he had an undiagnosed sister complex. Ew. That's all I'll say to that. The last guy, 5, they said always seemed fine to them. They didn't elaborate, so I don't know what their idea of fine is. Sorry to disappoint. Not long after we got back to the camp we heard engines in the distance, and as they got closer and closer we all stared in confusion. No one should be riding vehicles out this way, and friend 6 knows her BF wouldn't come out here without alerting us. The vehicles stopped after surrounding us with their lights, pointing right at us. We heard the familiar voices of guy 3, along with 4 new voices. He whined about how we hired his whittle fifis or something obnoxious. I tried to listen, but it's just so hard to listen to some overgrown piss baby go on about their fragile ego. Guys 1 and 2 went to confront guy 3 and his posse, asking why they didn't wait at the car. Guy 3 told them they wouldn't understand because they've given themselves over to feminist ideas and allowed themselves to become beta kooks. He told them that simps deserve to die so other men won't be warped by feminist witch pussy magic like they have. Like we just met these guys and he's already acting like we had sex. This man's logic was like a runaway train. The cars are all there but they ain't making it to their destination. Guys 1 and 2 continue to argue with guys 3, 4, and 5, before guys 6 and 7 come up behind them and put knives to their necks. At this moment I noticed a gleam in guy 3's eyes. He now thinks he's invincible. I can see the depravity in his eyes as he looks upon friend 2, stripping her down in his mind, imagining all the sick things he'll do. And as if to validate my suspicions, he walks up to her and says, "You never did complete that dare. How about we start a new game? But this time we won't have any need for truths." I watch as fear washes over 2's face, as she begins to imagine what he is implying, almost as if his depraved thoughts were being projected into her mind, instilling suffering on her before he had even begun to touch her. She catches herself, refusing to give him the satisfaction of fear, and spits in his face. She then tells him, "You couldn't even please your hand with a prick that small." The look of anger on his face was honestly delectable. "If I could, I would put it on canvas and call it Portrait of a Scorned Man, or Man Who Just Realized Being a Dick Doesn't Make Yours Bigger." Anyways, he then began to yell something about it's up to real men to show women their place in society. Oh, so angry. They started circling around us like starving wolves. One of them placed themselves against friend Five's back and said, "I always wondered if trans women looked different down there." Which angered friend 5, but not as much as it did friend 4, who tends to be a bit of a hothead. Friend 4 may look like a pretty cute petite princess, but she's manlier than most men I know. She's a competitive marksman, as well as being a gymrat who likes to build cars on the weekends. She's also the girlfriend of friend 5, not that that's important, but I feel like it should be important. So anyways, she starts blasting, right? And one of these guys yells, "What the fuck, they've got funds? Who the fuck gave these stupid bitches guns?" I then hear one of them try to antagonize her by saying, "Pretty young thing, like you shouldn't be carrying such a big piece until she's used to it." Ayo. So she shot around off at the tree he took shelter behind, as if to mock him by letting him know his life is in her hands. She looked like a real boss bitch, like for real. That girl is him. She has always been him, she will always be him. While this was taking place, friend 6 reached out to her boyfriend now that we could finally use the radio without fear of them taking it. We explained what was happening and asked him to bring help. He told us to tie the button down and to hide it from sight so that he could listen in while he headed to the station to get help. I feel so bad for that man, having to listen to all those screams, feeling completely powerless to do anything in the moment, but we're so thankful to him for being there in the way that he was. Gunfire kept ringing out as 4 kept firing rounds into the forests, yelling, "I shoot to maim, and you're not safe here," hoping to scare the men enough to make them retreat because none of them seemed to have rifles on them. But then we hear it. The first scream. Everyone freezes in their tracks, their hearts stilled by this sudden shriek of terror that seemed to only further race towards the all-consuming darkness. The moment it stopped, nothing remained but the slow encroaching crawl of raindrops and the rapid beating drums of the fear in our hearts. It's then that the rain came down like a closing curtain on the chapter of our innocence, because that's when we heard the second scream, a scream just as chilling as the first, ascending high into the tree tops before we see something that shocks everyone to their core, the haunting image of a man's face still screaming, a face still unaware it's going to meet, a face that still hopes to be saved but never will. Within unison, as if hell had a chorus, we all screamed in silence as we turned to run. With no other means of safety, my friends, guys 1 and 2, as well as myself, ran for the tent. We don't really know what happened after we got into the tent, but not a second went by that we didn't think we wouldn't be next. We know better now, but in that moment I felt both relief and fear for my life. I just kept thinking how lucky I was that I was fortunate enough to die with my dignity still intact. I kept thinking at least those man babies didn't get to do whatever depravity they had in mind. Well, by now everyone knows what happened, it's been on the news. Those 3 guys and all of their cronies turned up missing. But what the news won't tell you is that we were saved by Mama Makwa. We call her that due to the sounds we heard, as well as the sight we saw afterwards. The bellowing sound of vengeance that came in the form of a bear's roar was as loud as the mean screaming they saw a demonic horned 9 feet tall bear with skin dripping off of its bone like fur. We later learned that men referred to it as slippy skin, aka Wijuk, as it seemed the bear would change appearance depending on who gazed upon its visage, but this was not Wijuk. One by one, we heard those men scream for their lives, describing a creature with a mouth made of human hands that had palms covered by teeth shaped like hypodermic needles. It had claws that seemed like stone daggers that were etched by the Ojibwe. The men warned each other don't look into its eyes, before proclaiming how sorry they were for the things they'd done. They complained of the putrid stench suffocating them as they were pulled into its gaping maw. They screamed of the creature's rotting viscous flesh melting into their own, and making their skin a part of it, as if their skins were fuel for the fear this beast could instill by its mere dominion over them. But we never saw that creature. Instead, after the screams stopped, we were greeted by this beautiful creature that looked like a bear, only it had this glow about it, and its fur seemed almost like the softest of opalescent feathers. On its head it wore antlers in the shape of a crown, as if the forest itself had named her queen, and its paws were adorned with claws that resembled diamonds. Its eyes looked just like the aurora borealis, and she was mesmerizing. We felt safe, and welcomed, and most of all protected. After everything that happened, I think we will be coming back, because we know Mama Makwa will be there to protect us. We believe Mama Makwa is an avenging spirit born from the fear those lost daughters felt, here to make sure no other women ever have to suffer like they did within this forest. We also now understand why those men all went missing. My boyfriend and friend two's husband weren't attacked by Mama Makwa. Only the men who felt any sort of ill intent toward us women that night saw Mama Makwa in that form, the form they confused for Slippy. But knowing there is a safe haven for women out there, I'm thinking we will have another girls' night next year. Anybody wanna come?